All right. Well, welcome back, Jana. We're so excited to have you back again. And we've been excited to have this conversation in particular. I was just listening to the last episode that you came on for that was about faith crisis, which I just want to say is still in our top 5 most downloaded, listened to episodes. So I think you struck a chord, and there was one part of that conversation that has been on my mind because it felt like we just didn't have the time to really dive in. And it was at this point where we started talking about mixed faith marriages for some reason. And you just paused the conversation and said, in that situation, you really have to do your own inner work. You have to deal with your own stuff before you can show up as a loving, present partner. And there just wasn't time to really say, what does that even look like and how and why? And so we're kind of hoping that will be this conversation, not necessarily just for mixed faith marriages, but for dealing with hard things, with dealing with negative emotions and learning how to process those in a way that is productive, that doesn't look like shoving it under the rug or avoiding it or distracting so that we don't have to feel it. And it feels like this is a place where we could use some development. So this is what we hope for the conversation. And maybe that's a starting place too. Can you just talk about your observations in our community and where you maybe see some pain points with your own clients and this idea of processing negative emotion?
Yeah. I mean, I've been working in my business for about 8 years, working with clients all along the faith spectrum and often together, people in different parts of the spectrum together. And it is one of I think the places, if the field is ripe and ready for harvest, this is one of the places where I see it. Is in our ability to emotionally process things. I see it stopping our development and getting in the way of our relationships and also our spiritual development in a lot of ways. And I don't want to just blame our community, our little LDS community. It is part of a broader trend within, I think, our country and the West, that we have a certain way of dealing with being human, but we really kind of specialize with it. And we do community in a very special way, and we value community to a very high degree. So I think this kind of emotional processing is essential if we really want to do that well, and if we want to stay viable as a group.
Maybe could you just give like a somewhat straightforward definition for processing emotion? I don't want to say for all the, men out there, but just like if somebody is wondering, what do we mean when we say processing emotion?
Yeah.
What's the most?
Yeah. And I love that you're asking that, Tim, as the man.
Yes.
Because, and I hate to just say it's all men and all women are this way, but there are definitely trends. And some of those are probably innate and some of those are societal and some of those are learned. And I think there is something about patriarchy that does shut this down, especially for men in our culture. So, and I've noticed this in my office. I even notice it in the flavor of how people come in with questions about faith. It's often very intellectual for men, and it's usually more cultural for women or, interpersonal or, so I'll just back up and talk about what an emotion actually is, because I think our traditional definitions have made it be something that's more just like a mental condition or something. And sometimes we even talk about it that way, a condition, right?
Totally.
And we vilify what it is. We want to be completely in control of all our emotions, as if that is going to come in the way of our intelligence.
Yeah. And certain emotions are bad and certain emotions are desired.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even we started the conversation with the negative emotions, right? I would just say emotions are emotions. And what makes it negative is the impact it has on our bodies. So the first thing I want to tell all the men and all the women, but all the men, is that emotions are physiological. They are in our bodies. Anytime you have an emotion, you will feel it in your body. And most of the time, you're feeling it in your body first. Then the reason we don't recognize this is that we have completely detached from our bodies and we live in our heads. I have heard Eastern practitioners make fun of people in the West calling us oranges on toothpicks. Because this is all we are. This is how we do religion in the West. We assent to things. We talk about our beliefs. We break it down. We make sense of it rather than an experience of God, like that is full-bodied, full-hearted. So, so an emotion starts in the body, and the nervous system that conveys that to our consciousness is lightning years faster than our brain. You can get angry with somebody and you won't know for 3 days why.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you never know why, especially if you just stop. If you stop the emotion and stuff it and avoid, you'll never know why. So really what an emotion is, it is a mental process. It is also a physiological process. And it's often the feedback loop that happens between the two. So the process gets started in a way that is absolutely subconscious. We will, our nervous system, our body will notice a threat, whatever that is, that's learned. And then our brain feels that sensation that is negative because it doesn't feel good, because the kinds of chemicals that are released in our brain, the cortisol, the norepinephrine, the adrenaline doesn't feel good. It literally does not feel good in our bodies.
Yeah. So you're saying that someone, if they were very aware of their body, there would be a physical sensation somewhere in their body that would be the sort of original starting point.
That's right. Most of the time.
And where, what's an example? Where might somebody feel this in their body as they're becoming aware of it?
Yeah. So it's different for different people, but very commonly what's being activated is our fight, flight, our nervous system goes into its sympathetic nervous system, and it's ready for a fight or to flee. So you're often going to feel this. A lot of people feel this in their chest. They'll feel tight. They'll feel ready for a fight. They'll feel tightness in their shoulders, in their neck. You might even notice your tongue go up to the roof of your mouth. And then people feel it a lot in their gut.
So when you say a physical sensation, I can think of when and this is something I've had to really work on, because I 100% felt like I was detached on purpose. And I remember looking for solutions for not feeling anger. I thought I was trying to not have that emotion arise spontaneously, because, any man who is angry with his brother is in danger. And so I was trying to never have that feeling, which totally doesn't work. But I think what it looked like was just detaching as much as I could, like intentionally detaching. And so I've been undoing that for years and years. But I would describe those now when I sense anger, it feels so specific. I don't understand how my body creates that sensation, but it feels like something I could even picture. Like it feels hot and solid, and like I could point to where it is in my chest.
And I will just point out, there are a lot of people that will come to my office and I'll ask them where they're feeling that, and they have no idea. They're so detached that they have no idea. And you can tell when you start to be more somatically aware of what's going on in your body, you'll be able to do what you just said. People will start to be able to say, oh, it's a temperature. Oh, it's sharp. It's this color. It's fluttery. It's,
Okay. So when you practice that, do you get to a place eventually where you recognize this heat means anger, or this chill, or this feeling of hollowness is fear, and you're naming it based on the sensation, not because I think it's still very attached to the thought and like looking for the reason, and then I can explain how it's connected. But you're saying eventually you're scanning, you recognize fear before your brain can name it fear.
Yeah, I think that different types of fear maybe even will show up in different parts of your body. Like it gets very, very specific.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Because sometimes anxiousness and nervousness and anticipation all feel similar.
Yeah.
And it is the way that our brain defines it. It actually has an impact. That's what I'm talking about with the feedback loop.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
If I name it anticipation, it actually has effect on my physiology.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So this is why our thoughts are important, because we can't control our nervous system. Everyone comes into my office saying, Just make it so I'm not angry anymore. Make it so I don't have any triggers anymore. And I have to break it to them. I'm so sorry I don't have that power because you're a human and we don't want to shut down your humanity. And these emotions are really important. And it's a both and. And over time, when we learn to process these things, recognize them, understand them, move through them, transmute them into wise action, over time, they become less bothersome.
So when you say we don't control our nervous system, are you also saying or not that we don't control our emotions? And in either case, what do we actually control?
Yeah. So we can control our reaction to the stimulus. So life has brought us the stimulus, right? There's a reason that some people are afraid of heights and some others aren't. There's a reason that some people really react to loud noises or react to anger in signs of anger in another person, and other people don't as much. Our life builds our nervous system, and most of that is actually done in the first 7 years of life. Our nervous system is fairly complete at that point. And we have neuroplasticity, which means that we can have long-term effect over our emotions and our reactions. And even just the way we're wired and what we're reacting to. We do know that. But it is not instantaneous. And it's not volitional.
So are you saying you can't will yourself to stop having the sensation of anger or fear?
Correct. Because when our nervous system is activated, it's part of our autonomic nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system is the part that is not volitional. You don't control your heart beating. You can't decide, I want my heart to beat at 70 beats per minute. You know, you don't tell yourself to digest. It just happens. All of these things are temperature regulation. These things are all part of the autonomic nervous system. There's only one part of the autonomic nervous system we have any control over, and that's our breath. Right? That one is automatic. You don't have to think about it. But if you think about it, you can control it.
That's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's any mistake why every meditation type of meditation that I've ever heard of starts with the breath, even though there are very different ways to enter meditation. Yeah. Very different streams of thought on it. Yeah.
So when a client comes into your office and you get into a line of questioning where you're saying, where do you feel that in their body? Yes. What are you responding to? Like, what have they said to where you would respond and say, well, where are you feeling that? Are they saying I'm angry, or like, what is the?
Yeah. So I really like to start with just the sensation.
Okay.
Because otherwise our brain is kind of in that loop that is either, and I have to also say this, humans have a negativity bias. This is part of our survival. When I notice danger, if I'm walking along a trail, and honestly, this is the example that always comes to me now that I used to run and walk the pipeline trail at Mill Creek Canyon all the time. And now my nervous system is a wreck there because someone was attacked by a mountain lion.
Oh. Wait, is this the one with the viral video?
No, that one was up here somewhere, but that one too. But when it happens on your trail, you're just never the same. But this is how people are. I mean, we were hunter-gatherers until like 6 minutes ago on the timeline of us being humans, right?
So for survival purposes, it's better to notice the threat, even if it's non-existent.
Absolutely. Like my awareness, if I'm out on a hike, enjoying the day and seeing the trees and the birds and the sky and the beauty, and then I hear the rustle in the bush, everything goes, and that's all I see here. And I'm just listening for the threat. And if I assume it's a bunny and it's a mountain lion, it doesn't go so well, right? Yeah. So it's another thing to notice about humans is we do have a negativity bias.
Yeah, but if you assumed it was a mountain lion and it was a bunny,
you're better equipped.
Yes, you're anxious maybe and like riled up, but you survived.
Correct. So if you notice this loop, if you are going to catastrophizing, which most of us do a lot of the time, and that kind of system is purposefully, but it's a lying liar who lies because it's convincing us that likelihood is 97% likely to happen when it's usually reversed. It's usually the worst case scenario is very rarely the thing that happens, right?
So should we take it as a goal to calm that negativity bias, or should we just accept that that's keeping us alive?
Yes, both.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the way through is actually acceptance. We are so used to wanting to control everything.
Yeah.
And we can't control everything. We have to get into acceptance of what is. And the irony is that the more acceptance we get into of what is, the more reality we get to it with what is, the more able we are to affect a better outcome.
Yeah.
But we have to become aware, because without awareness, you will react. We are built for reaction.
Yeah. Okay,
and we are
that
built
makes sense.
to catastrophize, right? So we'll go to the worst case scenario, which guess what that's doing to your physiology? It's amping it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I can notice what's going on with my thoughts, that's the place where I have power to recognize my stories, question my stories, see if I can get into and see if I can get into a deeper reality and a wider view of what life is.
Yeah.
Just because this moment is sad does not mean all of life is sad. Just because I'm angry with this doesn't mean that my whole life is out to get me.
Yeah. Okay, that's so this makes sense to me. In the mountain lion example, it makes sense to me that if you try to suppress these sensations, try to ignore it and calm it makes sense that your body is going to amplify the voice, because you're not listening, because there's danger, there's danger in the bush, maybe.
Right.
And so it makes sense that by trying to ignore or resist, it's actually making it, those sensations are going to get more intense.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're on the trail. What does it actually look like to be aware? Like when you first get that twinge of fear and you start feeling your heart race, then what do you do?
Well, I think you have to, again, be in reality and you don't want to calm things down when there's an actual threat.
Right.
This whole thing is not just about going through life being calm. This is where we've gone wrong. We think that we should be calm all the time. We think that is a healthy way to be. Yeah. And it's not. A healthy nervous system can get to be on alert. Yeah. And it can soothe.
Yeah.
And it knows how to either co-regulate with other people or to self-regulate to get back to a healthy place.
So do you have a pattern of specific steps? Or were you going to have, you might have a better question than that.
No, that's what, let's do that, because then I want to ask you about some specifics, but what does it look like when you feel like, oh, my whole body is lighting up? Like I feel head to toe, there, something is pumping. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to take us out of the trail because most of this is not happening on the trail. And it's actually more important for us to stay on alert on the trail where there's been a mountain lion, right?
Totally.
We're not trying to convince ourselves that there is no threat in the world. Yeah. That we're trying to equip ourselves to deal with the actual things that crop up in the world. Because as it turns out, we live in the lone and dreary world. We do not live in the Garden of Eden, no matter how much we try to climb our way back into it. So the first thing I would do is if I get a sudden jolt, it could be I'm realizing that someone is upset with me. I am realizing that I messed up in some way. I realize that, I've been unkind or, something comes up and I'm feeling it. The first thing I want to do to stop this, spiral from making things worse and catastrophizing, oh my gosh, I'm never going to have friends again and I'm going to die alone. I mean, that's where my head is going if I let it, right? Is to just notice the body's sensations. We've got to just cut through all of those stories and all of the ways that our ego is trying to protect us. Our ego has all kinds of stories at the ready to make ourselves, ready for what comes. So I really just sit with the sensation for a moment. And I think it's really important to do this do it in a way that we are resourced. And what I mean by resourced is do it in a place where we know we're safe. Do it to the degree that we're able to handle it, because trauma is real. So I always say I like to kind of scale this. How uncomfortable am I? On a scale from 1 to 10, how big does this feel? If it is a 7 to a 10, that's where you can re-traumatize. We have to do this with a lot of kindness if we really want to heal, because we want our nervous system to heal. So the first thing we do is pay attention to that body, bring in a lot of curiosity. And that's the very first thing I will tell my clients to say, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that that's what I'm experiencing? Where
so not
am
judging.
I? Yeah. It has to be without judgment. This is like the core of mindfulness,
Yeah.
right? Is to notice in a very specific way with no judgment. But I'm just sitting with that and going, okay, something really is happening with me. Isn't that interesting? What I'm so curious about this.
So
where am I feeling that?
So yeah, for listeners, like you're pointing to your chest, for
Yeah.
instance, but you're in this step, it sounds like you're sort of locating and maybe describing this sensation.
Yes. And then I'm resourcing myself physiologically by trying to bring on a more calm nervous system by breathing, taking deep breaths, box breathing, you know, 3 to 5 seconds in, 3 to 5 seconds holding, 3 to 5 seconds out.
Yeah.
That's an easy way. Feel your body sensation. Feel yourself in your chair. Feel the earth holding you. And give your body a chance to look around and notice there's not a mountain lion. Because our nervous system doesn't know the difference between someone's mad at me and I'm being tracked by a mountain lion. It doesn't speak English. It just knows there was a threat and it's warning us.
Yeah.
So we just need to look around and make sure and let ourselves know that we are safe. So that's the first step.
Okay.
Next step is just to start to notice. How would I name this? How would I name this feeling? Okay.
And can you use words like anger, sadness?
Sure.
That kind of thing there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's important to start to use that. And and it's really hard for a lot of people. Some people have shut this down their entire lives. So even just getting an emotion wheel or just look up a list of emotions and look and find a name that feels like it describes what you're dealing with. And then ask yourself why this makes perfect sense. What is right about this? What is right about, and this is the hardest step, to ask yourself what's right about my body going haywire. It seems very counterintuitive. But it's a powerful practice to ask, what is right about this? What is my body warning me of? What could happen? What stories am I telling myself about that? What assumptions am I making about other people, about what do I fear they're thinking? Learning to let go of what I don't have control over in this.
With that one, how can you avoid doubling down, especially in the case where you're feeling guilty about something? And then I ask myself, well, what's right about that? And then I start beating myself up again.
Yeah. This is one of the hardest things, right? Because this is another thing. You ask some of the patterns that I see in my office. This is a big one. The most successful people who are able to really have dreams and goals and work toward them, know that mistakes are essential and they don't let it take them down when they're made. Mistakes can be powerful. It can be a powerful learning tool if we don't get caught in the loop of beating ourselves up. Guilt is healthy because it helps us recognize the mistake. You don't want to see the person who feels no guilt.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't want it to go to shame. We don't want it to go to a story about how broken we are. That's what the difference. Shame says, I'm bad, I'm broken, I'm the problem. Instead of, oh, well, that's a normal part of humanity. Of course I made a mistake. Of course I did. What's right about this? What's right about this is wonderful. I get to now try something else that will work better. Right? Yeah. And it is one of the biggest things that I see trip us up in trying to change our patterns is getting lost in guilt.
Really?
We're very guilt prone.
Yeah.
My husband used to joke that that's her 13th article of faith.
Yeah.
Is thou shalt we believe in guilt.
Feel guilty.
We believe in guilt.
Yeah.
You know.
I love all of this because I think this is something that we've really learned a lot from Thomas McConkie. And I've noticed, and I understand that we need to set aside trauma, like you're saying, but in regular daily life, usually the super uncomfortable sensations that feel like a big deal, when I can isolate just the sensation, are super handleable, you know, like I can, the actual physical discomfort that comes with anger, like that tightness or heat or, you know, whatever, or anxiousness, like that fluttery, for me, it feels like jitters all the way through. Like if I can just isolate the sensation itself, it's not like sharp pain, it's not like excruciating, like I can't handle this sensation.
Right.
But because it's always so tangled in my stories about it, that's the thing that is untenable. And I think, so I love that that's the first step, because it really does feel like for me so much, if I can just be intentional about feeling it, period, then a lot of times it's like it takes care of itself. I can stop pushing it away and being so afraid of the feeling itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is key. I think that so many of us go through life acting out in a way that we're not conscious of, solely to not feel certain sensations in the body. And just like, going to the gym, we know we're doing something if we're feeling some pain.
Yeah.
You don't get results at the gym.
Right.
Yeah. If you come away the next day and feel nothing, you didn't, you need to up your weight. Right? It's the same thing with our emotions. We can build, it's a muscle that we can build a tolerance for some discomfort. And depending on how my mindset of going into the gym, if I think that nothing should hurt, nothing should be hard, nothing, then I'm going to be really miserable, actually. Yeah. But if most of us can deal with hard things if we see a purpose in it, right? I mean, if we really care about something, most of us are willing to go through pain for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if we're in the gym and I have a mindset that, oh, I'm gonna feel this. It's gonna be a little hard, and I'm doing this for a really good reason. And this is, while also being mindful not to push ourselves to injury.
Yes.
Right.
The pain probably shouldn't be a 7+.
It shouldn't be a 7+ at the gym, right?
Yeah.
This works everywhere.
Yeah.
The 4 to 6 range is where you're actually going to see benefit. So if you can learn to tolerate some discomfort, and some people cannot tolerate any discomfort, it is too scary to their body. They've been through too many things, and the body is just trained to say, this is going to take us down if you feel any of it. So this is why going and working with therapists and coaches and people can be really helpful to help you ease in.
Yeah. Because
only we can do our own healing and understand our own physiology and what's going on. And we can't do it alone. It's really important to be able to have other people to reflect to us and to be there for us and to empathize with us and to companion us through. Yeah. So you need someone like that, a good friend, a loved one, or a good paid professional.
Yeah.
Or all of the above.
Yeah. Did you, so did we make it all the way through the exercise? So once we got to
awareness,
step through,
awareness.
And then noticing your stories.
Yes. And starting to question.
Okay.
And then really everything that should come through from this should point us toward good action. Okay. Like alignment with our own values, alignment with who you are, alignment with what you want. And this is where we start to really understand ourselves. And actually our negative emotions can teach us that if we don't know what it is.
Wow.
There's something really beautiful about humans. And I think all of the wisdom traditions have tried to point us to this. And I think psychology is trying to name this also. We find this from lots of different streams of knowledge. Richard Schwartz, who is the innovator of internal family systems. He's noticed as he works with people, there seems to be this deep core part of us, some traditions call it the true self, some call it the Buddha nature, some people call it our soul, but it's a piece of us that has never been hurt. There's a piece of us that is attached to something so much bigger, that is inextricably connected to love, that really deeply cares for us in some way, and that wants the best for us. And I think that's the piece, the way Richard Schwartz would talk about it. There are protectors that grow out of this to try to protect that part of ourselves. But if that piece of us weren't there, we wouldn't be having all these negative emotions anyway. There's a piece of us that knows we deserve better.
I see.
Yeah.
All humans human differently. But there are certain things that we all have in common. And if you'll notice, most of us are really inspired by seeing someone help another person by people going out of their way, showing love, showing mercy. There's something very innate about that. And most of this work is to try to understand all the processes that and survival systems within each one of us that have grown up to try to protect that. Mm-hmm. And instead of learning new things, this is part of second half of life, is going inside and trying to peel back the layers of all the protections that we thought we needed, but maybe it's getting in the way now.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's important to really frame probably this discussion in why. Why do any of this? What does it actually do for us?
Yeah.
Why go through it? Because like I said, we can do hard things if we have a purpose. But if I'm just in pain, I just want out of it.
Yeah.
Unless I can frame it and understand it. So the last piece is transmuting it into good action that is wise. This is how we gain wisdom. Mm-hmm. As I said, we were not meant to grow up in the Garden of Eden. I never understood the purpose of the cherubim and the flaming sword. And I'm learning that actually we really need that to guard the way back, because all of us want to just go back to the Garden of Eden. We don't want to be human.
Yeah.
But we're meant to be fully human. This is a gift. Men are that they might have joy. Men and women are that they might have joy.
Yeah.
You're not going to have the joy without the sorrow.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. We believe that there must be opposition in all things, and then we do everything we can to not actually have to live that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's so true.
We need this for growth.
Yeah.
As we've discussed, we need this if we are going to fulfill the whole measure of being a human. We have to be able to experience all of what it is to be a human. And we have to think beyond the next 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And we have to build endurance and tolerance and wisdom and empathy if we're going to be like the people at the Waters of Mormon, who are going to be part of a community who we're here to mourn with one another. I don't know that we can fully live the gospel unless we learn how to do this.
I think that's right. What I really like about the pattern you laid out is this fusion of contemplation and action. So like it starts with contemplation.
That always comes
I've sat down. I've felt the earth in my chair holding me. I've started breathing. I've located what's going on in my body. I've seen it for what it is. I've asked these questions. And then once I've gone through it all, it needs to lead into wise action.
That's right.
And it all comes together as it always does.
That's right.
Yeah. Beautiful.
That's right.
Can I ask you what do you have clients ever who are expressing an emotion that they feel, but that it's like the real problem is that they feel bad for the feeling?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just starts with understanding the concept that everything belongs.
Okay. Like that there's a reason that makes sense for this emotion.
Absolutely.
And that really is the most powerful thing. Like believing that your body and that ability to feel emotions really is millions of years older than your mind, and being able to process these ideas and stories. Like that deep wisdom is something that really helps me trust it. It's okay that I can't even explain it. My body knows this. End of story. And I think that has felt like permission for me to just let feelings come and go.
So everything starts with awareness. Everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Einstein was once asked, how do you go about dealing with finding solutions to problems? And he says, if you have an hour to figure something out, you better spend 55 minutes of that examining the problem.
Wow.
And 5 minutes talking about solutions, or you're not even addressing the right thing. Right. So awareness is the first thing. So noticing, okay, I feel sad. Oh, I shouldn't feel sad. It's almost automatic that those shoulds or shouldn'ts are right
exactly
there
what I mean.
from our programming, because we've learned those to stay safe. We've learned those from the time we were a child to stay safe.
Oh.
Because we are a very polite society, and we don't want anyone making problems for each other. And there's a beautiful side of that. We never want to let go. And it also requires us to mask up and mask our humanity and be something we're not, and learn to stuff what's really going on with us, because we don't really want to be a problem. But here's the problem. Everyone has problems.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to live with anybody else, I'm going to have a problem with them. you will inevitably hurt people when you live with them long enough.
Yeah.
And it will almost never be intentional. And this is really hard for us to deal with.
Yeah.
Right?
The same must be true of living in community, being in a church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are really good at masking up. When you start to do this work and you'll notice, okay, I've named I'm sad, I shouldn't feel that. It's starting to notice that.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, the more meta you get, the more you do the work, the more meta you can get, the more you can notice and say, oh yeah, I'm feeling immediately guilty. Isn't that interesting? You know? So it's just every time something shows up, make room for it and get curious. Make room for it.
Yeah.
How does that make perfect sense that I feel guilty about that?
Oh, wow.
So
yeah,
that's
one more layer.
Yeah. That's one phrase I always like to have in my back pocket. How does this make perfect sense? Why does this make perfect sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, no judgment. That's my body is doing something intelligent.
Yeah.
And the more we do this, the more self-trust we gain. And far from having our emotions take away from our intelligence in some way, it actually adds to our wisdom over time.
Wow. So what happens when you don't do that, when you do stuff, when everything goes under the rug or you just stuffing it down, like what eventually happens?
A lot of things. I mean, we are at an interesting time in history where we have this huge uptick in understanding about nervous system and the way that trauma and difficulties live in our body. And we're understanding more fully this mind-body connection. I mean, it's been noticed for a long time. I mean, Plato even talked about this mind-body connection. But we have the technology to actually see what is happening. So when we stuff things down, it doesn't go away. The energy doesn't go away. Our subconscious holds on to the thoughts. It doesn't have a chance to process through. It can get stuck. It actually can become neurosis. And physiologically can affect your immune system. It affects your nervous system. Not every physiological problem starts in the brain, obviously, or starts in the emotions. But when we feel stress and chronic stress, when you have those chemicals firing for longer than they need to, it does have a physiological effect on your body. It will affect your relationships. It will affect your ability to connect with other people, because when we become good at avoiding or stuffing, detachment always follows.
Oh, wow.
And if I can't attach to what's real and emotional in myself, I can't do it with you.
Right.
Real empathy requires me to access something that I've been through, that I know, in order to understand you. So it affects our communities, it affects our relationships, and it affects our health.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's also like this. I explain it like this. If you picture having this giant beach ball and I'm pushing it down under the water and I'm trying to keep it down, you can do that for just so long, but you're exerting a lot of energy. You're getting tired. And eventually it's going to pop out and smack your friend right in the face when you didn't mean it. This is what happens when we try to hold down emotions. It's also like a steam valve that's just building up pressure. When it blows, it's going to be an explosion.
We just had Joseph Grenny on, and he said you have to stop lying to yourself and believing that you have this choice between talking about having a crucial conversation with somebody and not having a crucial conversation, because
that's right.
Your actual choice is to talk it out or to act it out.
That's right.
And yeah, but yeah. So maybe talk to those people, like talk to somebody who's feeling really challenged by this, because their understanding of the gospel is that love should look like you're not in conflict with people and bringing up your stuff. There's definitely something we're interpreting that trickles down as niceness. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would argue that our goal needs to be kind and not necessarily nice.
Okay.
So kind, in order to be kind, we need to be clear. In order to be kind, we need to be aware. We need to be specific, right? So of course, I think rather than putting the goal be, this is what I should be, If we make the goal, whatever I am is allowed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be destructive with my emotions. This is why anger, probably more than any other, has gotten a bad rap in our scripture and in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can be scary. It can be destructive. And anger is also the truth. There's always there's a good impulse at the bottom of anger, always.
Mm.
There's an impulse to protect ourselves and others. It's noticing when we've been wronged. Or it's an invitation to look and see where we have really unrealistic expectations. But it's an invitation to course correct. It's only when we don't make room for it that then it starts being acted out as rage.
Wow.
Mm.
We can have really healthy anger if somebody does something to harm me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why living the gospel does not mean we just go out boundaryless into the world and just are nice all the time and no one offends me.
Mm-hmm.
It's noticing what's off so we can have very kind boundaries, because kind boundaries help us lean into somebody rather than you're scary, so I need to distance myself because I don't know how to actually hold a boundary with you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Wow. So
Because I'm just going to stop talking to you instead of deal with it with you and be able to have an actual relationship.
right.
There's wisdom in letting things go. There's wisdom in forgiveness.
Mm.
And you will also run into problems if you're trying to force a lot of this stuff rather than getting into the stream of what it is and understanding how it's affecting us and making choices about what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So there's truth to like, be cheerful. There's truth to that. We want that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to be able to do that if we never allow ourselves to not be cheerful.
Yeah.
Again, there's the
Wow.
opposition in all things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to a day when we can have more robust conversations about this, where I could raise my hand in Relief Society and say, I was really angry with my husband this week. And it was such a gift. It was such a gift. Because when I sat and thought about it and brought a lot of love, a lens of love to the situation, I realized that there were some things that I wasn't communicating very well. And we had an opportunity to talk about what was hurting in our relationship. And it was wonderful. I'm so grateful for my anger.
Yeah. That's interesting that that word that you chose, anger, is different than offended. I wonder if offended is not quite descriptive enough a word.
Totally,
maybe that's the issue. It's like when I say I'm offended, am I angry? Am I sad? And like
irritable. Like, it's just, it is.
And like walk through the process.
Am I hungry? Am I sleep deprived? Am I?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's really useful.
Yep.
So do you feel like there's a way that we could do this better culturally? Is it just that we're having more vulnerable conversations, more testimonies maybe, where people are in the middle of something hard instead of the cleaned up version where they figured everything out? What do you think a healthy ward looks like, literally in Relief Society or in sacrament meeting?
Well, if we were doing more of this work, it wouldn't turn into the confrontation we're afraid of. Just so you know. So So an author who has really affected my thinking on this is M. Scott Peck.
Okay.
He was very big in the 80s for The Road Less Traveled.
Mm-hmm.
But he also wrote this other book, The Different Drum, that was about community. So he's a psychologist, I think a PhD psychologist. And he named stages, we love stages, of community. And he named the first one pseudo community. Mm-hmm. And he named the last one like true community. Like that's what we really are longing for, right? Like this Zion community where we can really be there for each other, mourn with those that mourn, be joyful with, feel a lot of joy as a group, celebrate. Pseudo community is tidy. Pseudo community is keeping things really nice on the surface. If there's conflict, we just ignore it. Mm-hmm. We don't actually deal with it headlong. And there's a lot of resentment that pops up. And we largely will fall into that thing that Brene Brown talks about where we show up and fit in. Yeah. Rather than having full, true belonging. Okay. Which hits differently. Yeah. When you are fully accepted for exactly who you are without having to change you. Mm-hmm. I mean, miracles can happen in your life. That's the place of healing. That's the place of accessing love that really heals. That's the place of like lived atonement.
Yeah. And do you think a ward could be that?
It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take wise leadership, and it's going to take brave people, because stage 2 is chaos, which is why we maybe will tap into it, but we're not committed to it. We're not doing it consciously. Maybe one person is trying to bring something real, and it makes the entire room nervous. In my ward, we had a brave person who said, I don't feel like I belong. I don't have a spouse who comes with me here, and I don't know where I fit, and I'm sad. And I heard the talk afterwards in the hallway about how uncomfortable that made people and how inappropriate they thought it was.
Oh, that's the word, huh? That's what we call it.
We should do that in visiting teaching at the time. That was the thought. Just make it tidy, keep it in private, don't involve everyone, just one or two people.
Yeah.
And we don't have to go and be vulnerable with everything we've ever experienced in front of everyone we've ever met. There's also a wisdom to that. But we need to gain a tolerance for some discomfort. I don't think we like it when somebody else is even sad, even if it's an acceptable negative emotion.
Yeah.
We don't know how to deal with it. Because it's really hard for us to sit with it, because we've never learned to deal with our own sadness. So it's chaotic, and it's hard to start dealing with conflict when we have been so conflict averse. But you're right. If we don't deal with conflict head on with wisdom and love and kindness and directness, then it blows up. Yeah. It goes into resentment, and it really hits community in a bad way. The third stage is emptiness. We have to empty out all of these kind of learned things that are trying to keep a lid. So true community is one where we can deal with conflict. We're learning how to differentiate. We're learning that you are different than I am, and that's okay. That there's more than one road to the top of Mount Fuji. We don't all have to look exactly the same way, the way we're living the gospel, and that we all have something to learn from one another.
Yeah. I wonder if sometimes we experience that chaos and the emptiness, and then real connection in relationships that are more intimate. So before, and I know
I think that's where we have to start. You have to start in your intimate relationships.
Yeah.
You can't just go try to make an entire group of people. You have to be bought into this.
Right. And then you bring all that health. Yeah. But what does it look like? Like, talk about inside a family, where I think especially people who are probably listening to this podcast, this is somewhere in your family. If you have people who are in a different stage of faith than you are, that can really cause some tension that makes you show up in weird ways, because you're experiencing a lot of your own pain. And I think that can get really complicated in those relationships. So maybe using that as an example, what would you say to people who are trying to figure out how to process their own feelings so that they can stay connected and have real connection, not like these fake relationships where you're going to smile, but like you can feel you can feel everything that's happening under the surface.
Yeah. It's super tricky. And part of it is we have to recognize that a deep part of our humanity is our defense system. It's automatic. It's strong. It's there to keep us safe. Yeah. To me, I think that there's a place for an interpretation of the natural man being those automatic defenses.
Oh, interesting.
Not our evil humanity.
Yeah.
Totally.
I heard a podcast between, it was a conversation between Brene Brown and Richard Rohr. And he talked about this. He brought up this question of, in Christianity, if we have gone after the wrong thing, we've gone after our shadow, all of the things that we don't like about ourselves and we're trying to run away from and protect ourselves from, rather than our ego. We didn't go after the ego. We went after the shadow.
The ego sort of
That's
being
so
the
true.
opposite of the shadow in a lot of ways. It's the things we want to project to the world.
It's the things we want. It's the way we want to be viewed in the world. It's that defense mechanism, which is very healthy when we're aware of it. It's not something we want to get rid of, but it is something that we have to be aware of, or it's going to run us into a ditch because it's going to do whatever it can to squash you so that I can be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the opposite of really having connection with people. And I think it's one of the number one things I see in my office between couples is being aware of your own defense system and how it is actually getting in the way of what you also really need as a human being, which is that deep connection and belonging. Right. So it's always easier if everyone in the family is working on this and aware of it, but it's not necessary. One person doing this work can shift dynamics. Right. Mm-hmm. But what we have to do is we have to be aware of our defenses.
Okay.
We have to be really aware. Because in groups, we've learned this from the time we were just little. This is part of being human, is we often squash our authenticity in order to be acceptable. You know, if I stub my toe in the wrong place and I'm 3 years old, someone's going to get mad at me for screaming. We have to start to recognize all of the ways that we have squashed our authenticity for acceptance, and all of the ways that our defenses have built up around that to keep ourselves safe. Because our jobs as adults is to take that authenticity back. And we're actually built to do that on a physiological level. But we have to take our authenticity back. But that's going to require that we make space for each other to be who we are. I remember going to a Gottman seminar once, and someone asked, kind of as a culminating question at the end, like, what's the one thing that you think could help relationships? And he said, I think that probably the biggest thing that we could do to improve our relationships is learn to tolerate the emotional reactions of other people.
Wow.
Because I see this situation where we've all been taught to just be so nice. We don't know what to do when we're dysregulated. We don't know what to do when you're unhappy with me. That completely dysregulates me. And then my reaction completely dysregulates you, and we're off to the races.
So the tricky part is, let's say I'm getting there towards dysregulation because of someone else's reaction. I don't have time necessarily to sit down and go through my exercise, right? What's like the quick version of the pattern that we could go through in that very moment?
Pause. Don't respond out of your reaction. And this is a hard thing to train ourselves to do, but with work we can. It's learning that to recognize our bodily sensations and recognize when someone has just sent me to the moon and say, okay, is this something that I can sit and do a few exercises quickly to get to a good place where I can actually have a good conversation? Because literally your brain is lacking the electrical activity to the part of your brain that you need to be a decent human in that place, right?
Yeah. And Joseph Graney talked about this exact same thing too, where he says the question you can ask yourself in that very moment is, what do I really want?
Yeah.
And it's not just like the answer to the question that matters. Yeah. It's actually triggering that part of your brain that gets you back into being able to think beyond just that emotional reaction.
Absolutely. So I tell people to take space. When something is hard, just don't respond right away. We are so uncomfortable with silence, but silence is really good. And one of the things that I tell people to do is bring your awareness to the moment, understand what's happening, and don't deal with whatever you started fighting about. Don't deal with what you're disagreeing about, whatever it is, political, religious, how someone should be, what someone should have done. Don't get into the fighting over who's right. Start to be able to address what's happening in the moment, in the room. And just simply say, I'm noticing my defenses coming up. Yeah. It will completely shift a conversation if you start to address that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling dysregulated. How are you doing?
I think it rarely occurs to me that someone else is experiencing dysregulation exactly the way I do.
That's
And like,
right.
I think just having a touch point again to remember that they're trying to access their thoughts because that they're so dysregulated. I hate that feeling. And I think that would completely turn down the temperature of and the urgency of whatever the context is.
And again, everything belongs.
Yeah.
If I'm upset, there's a good reason. I'm guessing there might be a good reason for you.
Yeah.
And I also tell my clients, even though this is the ideal, it's going to take a long time, if ever, that we're going to get there. And sometimes we're going to say the sharp thing back. But we can, afterwards, if we've had a difficult conversation with somebody, we can, go to where our nervous system can be calm, think through it in better ways, bring our higher self back to a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then talk about what happened, not the thing. Don't relitigate the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so good. Thank you so much, Jana. What have we missed that you feel like you'd want people to understand about this or take home?
Yeah, I just want to, I would just maybe say we are meant in this life to be human. Too many of us are trying to outrun that. This is hence the guilt.
Yeah.
We're trying to not be human.
We're in the lone and dreary world.
We are. And Jesus came and said, hey, I'm the way, follow me. And I think most of us have been like, no, you go do the hard stuff. I'll be up here where you came from. I'm just going to hang out in the Garden of Eden and you go do the thing. It's to really experience the world. That's what Jesus did. He came and he experienced all of it.
Yeah.
All the sorrow, all the compassion, all of the difficult, all of the hard. And I think we're meant to do the same thing. We just have to accept that this is what it is and also recognize that we're not alone in facing the hard things.
Yeah.
So I think in many ways, the goal is to be fully human. And when we can approach our lives in a way that's like, I didn't like what happened there. Isn't that interesting? Oh, I was actually humaning really well. And I'm learning from that. And I can actually now come and make amends in a more authentic way that is not just putting a Band-Aid on something so that we can get along. But it's having an ability to hold it all. And that kind of emotional regulation will just pay massive dividends. It allows us to respond rather than react. And it helps us over time to more fully live up to our highest potential.
Thank you so much. That is such a powerful paradigm shift that I think could be so healing. Just having in mind, just an intention to live that way, I think is so empowering. So thank you so much.
You bet.
This has been great. Thank you, Jana.
Yeah, anytime.
All right, thanks so much for listening. We really hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Jana Spangler. You can find Jana at symmetrycounseling.com if you'd like to hear more from her. And if Faith Matters content is resonating with you and you get the chance, we would love for you to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. We read all of the reviews and it really helps us to get the word out about Faith Matters, and we appreciate the support. Thanks again for listening, and remember, you can check out more at faithmatters.org.